Brigitte Bardot died today. 3 hours later, in a Paris notary office, her estate executor opened the sealed envelope that had been locked in a vault for 60 years. The call came from Bardot's estate manager in Saint-Tropez. Natural causes. Peaceful. 91 years old. The woman who had defined sexuality for a generation, who had spent 50 years saving animals and avoiding the public gone. Letters were in this sealed envelope, stored in a private vault box that Bardot had maintained separately from her main estate. The box required 2 keys, one held by the notary, one by Bardot herself. Instructions were explicit, only after both gone. Both, not just him or her, both. Dubois stared at the envelope. The wax seal was intact dark red, imprinted with Bardot's initials. Across the front, in her own handwriting, faded but still legible, for history, after both of us. He knew who the other person was. Everyone in France knew. Alain Delon, with both now dead, the seal could be broken. Dubois called in his senior assistant as witness. Required for documents of potential historical significance. They photographed the envelope from every angle, documented the intact seal. Then, with a letter opener that had opened 10,000 mundane legal documents, Dubois broke the wax. Inside were 3 items. First, a handwritten letter, 3 pages, dated September 1965, addressed Alain in Bardot's elegant script. The paper had aged to ivory, the ink slightly faded but perfectly readable. Second, a single index card. Delon's handwriting. Just 4 lines. I received this September 1965. Read it 1,000 times. Never responded once. She never know how hard that was. Third, a note from Bardot recent, dated March 2024. Her handwriting shakier now. Age evident in the letters, but the words clear. The secret I kept for 60 years. The answer he never gave. Tell it now. We're both gone. It can't hurt us anymore. Dubois read the 1965 letter first, then again. Then a third time. His assistant, who had worked with Bardot's estate for 15 years, who had maintained perfect professional composure through every celebrity scandal and tabloid frenzy, read over his shoulder and whispered, "Mon Dieu." Because what Brigitte Bardot had written to Alain Delon in 1965 wasn't what anyone expected. It wasn't angry, wasn't demanding, wasn't the ultimatum she had given him 3 years earlier at Saint-Tropez when she had whispered, "Choose me or your career." This letter was something else entirely, something vulnerable. Something that revealed a side of Bardot the world had never seen. The sex symbol, stripped of armor, asking for something so simple it broke your heart. And Alain Delon, who had kept his own copy for 59 years, who had read it 1,000 times but never responded his note, explained why the silence had been necessary. Why answering would have destroyed them both. For 60 years, they had kept this secret. Through marriages and divorces, through careers and retirements, through decades of carefully avoiding each other at public events, through interviews where they had speak politely about their brief friendship, never mentioning what had passed between them in 1965. Both had died with the secret intact. Both had left instructions to reveal it only after both were gone. Because some truths are too dangerous to speak while the people involved are still breathing, some loves too powerful to revisit, some doors too risky to open even a crack. Maître Dubois looked at his assistant. Call the press office, and the biographers. They're going to want to see this. What Brigitte Bardot wrote to Alain Delon in 1965, and why he chose silence over response, was about to change everything the world thought it knew about the 2 most beautiful people in French cinema history. The letter began, "Alain, it's been 3 years since Saint-Tropez, and I need you to know something I should have said that night. To understand why Brigitte Bardot wrote that letter in 1965, you need to understand the 3 years of silence that came before it. 3 years of carefully avoiding each other. 3 years of reading about each other in newspapers. 3 years of pretending that night in Saint-Tropez never happened. August 1962. Saint-Tropez. Bardot's villa. The ultimatum whispered on a terrace overlooking the Mediterranean. Choose me or your career. Delon's answer. I choose me. He had walked away from the most famous woman in the world. Driven back to Paris. Left her standing alone on that terrace with 100 people watching through the windows. The story spread through French cinema like wildfire. Bardot rejected. For the first time in her life, a man had said no. The press tried to turn it into scandal. Tried to get either of them to comment, but both maintained perfect silence. Bardot smiled for cameras and said nothing. Delon attended premieres and changed the subject. Professionally, they handled it perfectly. Privately, it destroyed them both. For Bardot, The rejection wasn't about losing Delon. It was about realizing she had approached it wrong. She had made it an ultimatum. A power play. Choose me or choose career, as if love and ambition couldn't coexist. As if she had the right to demand someone reshape their entire life for her. She had done what she always did. Assumed every man would say yes because every man always had. And when Delon didn't, when he chose himself over her, she didn't feel rejected. She felt stupid. She had shown her hand, revealed she wanted him. And he had walked away anyway. For Delon, walking away from Bardot was the hardest thing he had ever done. Not because he loved her, he barely knew her, but because he wanted her. Wanted what she represented. Wanted to see if two people that beautiful, that ambitious, that damaged could make something work. But had watched what happened to men around Bardot. Vadim, reduced to the director who discovered her. Charrier, erased completely. Every man who got close to her seemed to lose definition, seemed to become satellite to her son. And Delon had clawed his way up from nothing, from foster homes, from poverty, from being nobody to become somebody. He refused to become Brigitte Bardot's boyfriend, so he had walked away, and it had taken everything he had. The months after Saint-Tropez, both threw themselves into work. Bardot made 3 films in 18 months. Delon made 4. Both were photographed constantly at parties, at premieres, with other lovers. The press waited for them to cross paths, waited for the confrontation, the rekindling, the drama. But they never did. Because both made sure they were never in the same room. Award shows? If Bardot was presenting, Delon didn't attend. Film festivals? They checked guest lists before confirming. Parties? Their assistants coordinated to ensure they never overlapped. For 3 years, in a French film industry that numbered maybe 500 people who mattered, Brigitte Bardot and Alain Delon never accidentally ran into each other, because it wasn't accidental, it was orchestrated. 1964 arrived. January. Delon broke his engagement to Romy Schneider. The tabloids went insane. After 5 years together, the beautiful couple was done. Speculation ran wild. Was it for Bardot? Had he been waiting? Was this his way of signaling availability? No. Delon left Romy for the same reason he had rejected Bardot. Because he wasn't ready to be anyone's, not Romy's husband. Not Bardot's partner. Not anyone's anything. He needed to be his own man. Solo, unattached. Free to build his career without compromise. Romy was devastated. The press was merciless. And Bardot, reading about it from her home in Saint-Tropez, felt something shift. Because Delon leaving Romy meant he had been serious. When he said, "I choose me," he hadn't been choosing career over Bardot specifically. He had been choosing himself over everyone. Over commitment. Over partnership. Over anything that might limit his ambition. It made his rejection less personal, and somehow that made it hurt more. In June 1964, Bardot married Gunter Sachs. German playboy. Millionaire, handsome, charming, safe. The wedding was spectacular. Helicopters dropping rose petals over Saint-Tropez. Photographs in every magazine in Europe. Bardot in white, smiling, beautiful. And utterly, completely settling. She didn't love Sachs the way she had imagined loving someone. She loved him the way you love a comfortable chair. Pleasant, reliable, undemanding. He worshipped her. Gave her everything she wanted. Never challenged her. Never pushed back. Never made her feel like she had to choose between him and anything else. He was the opposite of Alain Delon, which was exactly why she married him. But marriage didn't erase Delon from her mind. If anything, the safety of Sachs made her think about Delon more. About danger, about the storm she would marry to harbor to escape. About the man who had said no when everyone else said yes. By 1965, Bardot's marriage was already failing, not dramatically. Just quietly eroding. Sachs was too easy, too accommodating, too willing to reshape himself around her. She would wanted someone who could match her. Instead, she had married someone who had surrendered to her. And surrender, she was learning, was boring. In September 1965, 3 years since Saint-Tropez, Bardot was in her Paris apartment, alone. Sachs was in Munich on business. She had a film premiere the next week. A magazine cover shoot the day after. Her life was perfect on paper. And completely empty in reality. She thought about Delon constantly. Not romantically, not even sexually. Just wondered. What was he doing? Did he think about Saint-Tropez? Did he regret his choice? Did she even cross his mind? The wondering was worse than rejection. Rejection was clean, final. But wondering? Wondering was torture. What nobody knew, what Delon never knew until he received her letter, was that Bardot had been trying to reach him secretly for months. She had called mutual friends, asked casually about him, tried to engineer accidental encounters, had her assistant check if he'd be at certain events, all while maintaining her public persona of not caring, of having moved on, of being happily married, but she hadn't moved on. And neither had Delon. He had kept track of her too, read about her wedding, her films, her marriage to Sachs, and felt relieved. Because if she was married, she was safe from him. Safe from the temptation to try again. Safe from the disaster they both knew would happen if they ever actually got together. Delon dated casually, never seriously, worked constantly, built his career exactly as he had planned. Rocco and his brothers had made critics take him seriously. The Leopard had made him a star. Le Samurai was about to make him a legend. Everything was going according to plan. Except he thought about Bardot every single day. In September 15, 1965, Bardot sat at her desk in her Paris apartment. Candles lit, a bottle of wine half empty, gunner away. The apartment silent except for the sound of her pen on paper. She had tried to write this letter 100 times, started and stopped. Wrote drafts and burned them. But tonight, 3 years of wondering became unbearable. She wasn't going to demand, wasn't going to seduce, wasn't going to make it about her ego or her needs or her desire to prove she could win him. She was just going to be honest, vulnerable, real, the thing she had never been in St. Tropez when she had made it an ultimatum. She was going to ask the simplest, most terrifying question. Do you think about me? And whatever his answer, yes, no, or silence, at least she would know. At least the wondering would end. She wrote for 2 hours, 3 pages. Crossed things out, rewrote, made it perfect, made it honest. Made it impossible to misunderstand. Then she sealed it. Gave it to a mutual friend to hand-deliver, because she couldn't mail it. Couldn't risk secretaries or assistants or anyone seeing it. This had to be private, just between them. A question asked in the dark. An answer she had wait for in the silence. 3 days later, Alain Delon received a hand-delivered envelope at his apartment. He opened it, read it, and his hands started shaking. Because Brigitte Bardot had just asked him the one question he had been afraid to answer for 3 years. September 18, 1965. Evening. Alain Delon's apartment on Avenue Foch, Paris. The envelope sat on his dining table for 20 minutes before he opened it. He knew the handwriting. Recognized it from magazine interviews, from autographs he had seen, from the single birthday card she had sent him years ago when they were just acquaintances. Before St. Tropez. Before everything. Brigitte's handwriting, delivered by hand. No return address. Just his name on the front in her elegant script. He poured himself whiskey. Sat down. Opened the envelope carefully, preserving the seal as if it were evidence. 3 pages unfolded. Cream stationery. The scent of her perfume still faint on the paper. He read, Alain, it's been 3 years since St. Tropez. 3 years since I stood on that terrace and demanded you choose me or your career. I was wrong to make it a choice. I was wrong about everything that night. I don't write this to ask you to leave your life. I don't write to demand anything. I write because I think about you every day and I need to know. Do you think about me? Not as obligation, not as burden, just, do I cross your mind the way you cross mine? I married Gunter. You know this. The newspapers covered it like a state wedding. Helicopters. Rose petals. The whole circus. But I don't love him the way I thought I would love someone. I love him the way you love safety. The way you love something that can't hurt you. But you were the storm, Alain, and I missed the storm. I'm not asking for forever. I'm not asking you to destroy your career or your freedom or whatever it is you rebuilding alone. I'm asking for coffee. 1 hour. No cameras. No journalists. No friends watching through windows. Just 2 people who almost were something, talking honestly for the first time. In St. Tropez, I made it about power, about choosing, about who would bend and who would break. I was playing the game one always played: seduce, conquer, possess, and you saw through it. You said no, and you were right to say no. But this isn't that. This is me, Brigitte, not the image, not the sex symbol, not BB, just me. Asking if you ever wonder what we could have been if we had been different people? Less proud, less afraid, less ourselves. I think about that night constantly. Not with anger, with curiosity. You're the only man who ever walked away from me, the only one who chose himself over me. And part of me respects that more than I can say. But part of me wonders if walking away was the brave choice or the coward's choice. We're both cowards in different ways, aren't we? I hide behind beauty, you hide behind ambition. I seduce to avoid intimacy. You refuse to avoid vulnerability. We're mirrors. Broken mirrors, but mirrors. I don't know what I'm asking for. Maybe just acknowledgement. Maybe just to hear your voice without 100 people listening. Maybe just to sit across from you and see if the pull I felt that night was real, or if it was just ego and champagne and Mediterranean moonlight. If you don't want to meet, I understand. If reading this makes you angry, I understand that too. If you throw this letter away and never think about me again, that's your right. I gave up my right to demand anything from you the moment I made you choose in St. Tropez. But please respond. Even if it's no, even if it's leave me alone, even if it's just a single word, the silence is worse than rejection. The wondering is worse than knowing I won't write again. This is my single attempt, my one vulnerable moment. If you don't respond, I'll understand that silence is your answer. And I'll accept it. And I'll stop wondering. But God, Alain, I hope you respond. I hope you say yes to coffee. I hope you say no. I hope you say something. Anything. Because 3 years of silence is enough. 3 years of reading about you in magazines. 3 years of avoiding the same parties. 3 years of wondering if that night changed your life the way it changed mine. Do you think about me? That's all I'm really asking. That's the question underneath everything else. Do you think about me the way I think about you? Every day? Every night? Every time someone mentions your name or I see your face on a poster or I remember what it felt like to stand that close to you on that terrace, I'm not asking you to love me. I'm asking if you remember me. There's a cafe near Luxembourg Gardens. La Palette. I go there Thursdays at 3 p.m. I'll be there this Thursday, and the next, and the one after that, for a month. If you come, you come. If you don't, I'll know. I won't be angry. I'll just know, and the wondering will finally stop. Brigitte. Delon read the letter 3 times. The first time, his hands shook. The second time, his eyes blurred. The third time, he stood up and walked to his window, looked out at Paris, and felt something crack open in his chest that he kept sealed since St. Tropez. She asked the question he had been afraid to answer. Yes, he thought about her. Every single day. Every time he saw blonde hair in a crowd. Every time someone mentioned her name. Every time he remembered her hand on his arm, her whisper in his ear, her eyes watching him walk away. But answering meant opening the door he closed. And Alain Delon knew himself well enough to know, if he walked through that door, or if he showed up at La Palette on Thursday at 3 p.m., if he sat across from Brigitte Bardot and looked into those eyes again, everything he had built would collapse. All the discipline, all the focus, all the careful construction of Alain Delon, solo artist, independent man, beholden to no one. 1 hour of coffee would become dinner. Dinner would become a night. A night would become a week. And he would wake up 6 months later having lost himself completely in her orbit. He would watch it happen to every man before him. So Delon did the hardest thing he had ever done. He folded the letter, put it in his desk drawer, locked it, and he never responded. For 4 weeks, Alain Delon lived in hell. The letter stayed in his desk drawer, locked, but Delon carried the key in his pocket, touched it constantly. A physical reminder of the choice he'd made, the choice he was still making. Every hour, every day. Thursday, September 23, 1965. The first Thursday, Delon was in his apartment. He had cleared his schedule. Told his agent no meetings. Told himself he wasn't going to La Palette. Wasn't going to show up. Wasn't going to open that door. But then he picked up his car keys and drove toward Luxembourg Gardens. His mind raced. Just coffee. Just 1 hour. Just to see if the pull was real or if 3 years had made them strangers. He could keep it professional, controlled. One conversation didn't mean surrender. He was 2 blocks from La Palette. He pulled over, parked, sat in the car with the engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went white. 1 hour would become everything. He knew it. One look into her eyes and he would be lost. 1 hour of conversation and he would want dinner. 1 dinner and he would want a night. 1 night and he would want a lifetime. By 3 p.m., Delon turned the car around and drove home. He didn't know if Bardot had been there. Didn't know if she had sat at a table by the window, watching the door, waiting for him to walk through. Didn't know if she had stayed for an hour or left after 15 minutes, and not knowing was worse than anything. Thursday, September 30th. The second Thursday. This time Delon didn't even pretend he wasn't tempted. He woke up thinking about it. Spent the morning restless. He opened the desk drawer. Read the letter again. Do you think about me the way I think about you? Yes. God, yes. Every minute of every day. He started getting dressed. Looked at himself in the mirror. Saw what he was doing, preparing, hoping, already halfway to surrender. He took off the jacket. Changed into casual clothes. Didn't leave the apartment. He called the cafe, asked if they were busy. The hostess said, "Not too busy." A few regulars. "One woman's been here an hour, just ordered another coffee." Delon hung up. She was there. Delon broke. He was in the car. No hesitation this time, no turning around, he was going. He'd made his decision. 1 hour. He could handle 1 hour, he had to know. He parked 3 blocks away, walked toward the cafe. Could see it in the distance. The red awning. The tables outside. His heart pounding so hard he could hear it. 50 feet from the door he saw her, through the window, blonde hair, white blouse. Sitting at a corner table, alone. Reading a book, a coffee cup in front of her. She looked up at the door every time it opened, hopeful. Then back to her book when it wasn't him. Delon stopped walking. And God, she was beautiful. Even knowing what a disaster they would be together, 40 feet from the door now, he could walk in. Sit down, sit. I got your letter. Watch her face transform. See what happened next. But what happened next was the problem. Because Delon understood something in that moment, watching her through the window. If he walked through that door, he wouldn't walk back out the same man. Wouldn't walk back out alone. Wouldn't walk back out free. He would walk out hers. And everything he had built, every wall, every defense, every carefully constructed piece of independence, would crumble. He stood there for 3 minutes. 40 feet from the door, watching her read. Watching her look up hopefully at strangers. Watching her wait for him. Then he turned around, walked back to his car, drove home, and hated himself the entire way. October 14th, the fourth and final Thursday. Delon didn't go, didn't pretend he might. Just sat in his apartment, looking at the clock, knowing she was there. Knowing this was the last time she'd promised to wait. Knowing after today, the offer expired. For Brigitte Bardot, sitting alone in La Palette on that fourth Thursday, watching the clock tick past 4 p.m., the silence finally gave her the answer she'd been dreading. He didn't think about her, or if he did, not enough to matter. Not enough to show up. Not enough to say goodbye or hello or anything in between. The wondering was over. But the answer was worse than she'd imagined. She left the cafe, and never wrote to him again. Neither of them knew that the other was suffering just as much. That his silence wasn't indifference but self-preservation. That her acceptance wasn't peace but surrender. For 59 years they both carried the weight of those 4 Thursdays. The question asked, the answer never given, the door that stayed closed. Until today, until both were dead. Until the secret could finally be told. December 28, 2025. The same day Brigitte Bardot died. Mater Dubois had released the 1965 letter to the press 3 hours ago. The story was already going viral. Bardot's secret letter revealed the love that never was. 60 years of silence explained. Every news outlet in France was running it. The vulnerable letter. Delon's tortured silence. The 4 Thursdays at La Palette. A tragic love story. Beautiful, heartbreaking, complete, except it wasn't complete. At 6 p.m., Dubois received a call from Switzerland, from the executor handling Alain Delon's estate. The man's voice was shaking. "Laurent, we have a problem. We just found something in Delon's personal safe. Something that changes everything." 15 minutes later, Dubois was on a video call, staring at a document that made his blood run cold. A page from Delon's private journal. Dated October 15, 1965, 1 week after the 4th Thursday. 1 week after Bardot had stopped waiting at La Palette. The handwriting was unmistakably Delon's. The entry was brief, but it destroyed the entire narrative they had just released to the world. October 15th, 1965, I went to her. I couldn't stay away anymore. 4 weeks of torture ended tonight. I drove to her apartment. Didn't call ahead. Didn't plan what to say, just drove. She opened the door. Saw me. Didn't speak. Just pulled me inside. We didn't talk about the letter. Didn't talk about Saint Tropez. Didn't talk about the 4 Thursdays she waited or the 4 Thursdays I failed her. We just existed in the same room. Finally, after 3 years, I stayed until dawn. We made love. We talked. We laughed. We cried. We were everything we could never be in public, everything we almost were in St. Tropez, everything I'd been running from for 3 years. And then the sun came up, and we both knew. This couldn't be more than one night. One perfect night, because one night would make us want a lifetime, and a lifetime would destroy us both. At 6 a.m., I got dressed. She watched from the bed, both of us crying, both of us knowing this was goodbye. I asked, "Do we ever speak of this?" She said, "Never. This is ours, just ours. The world can think what it wants. But we will know." I kissed her one last time and left. We agreed to forget. To pretend it never happened. To let the silence stand as our public answer. But God, I will never forget. Every touch. Every word. Every moment of those 8 hours. I chose silence, but for one night I chose her too. And that has to be enough. Dubois stared at the screen. When was this found? This morning, after Bardot's death was announced. Delon's estate lawyer was cataloging items in the personal safe. The letter from Bardot was there, and this journal entry. Sealed together, with a note dated March 2024. What does the note say? It says, "Only release if Brigitte releases her version. If she took the secret to her grave, so do I, but if she tells the world about the letter, tell them about the night. Tell them the silence wasn't pure. Tell them we were weak. Tell them we were human." Dubois felt his world tilting. Does Bardot's estate have... Does she mention this? 20 minutes of frantic calls later, they found it. In the same sealed envelope that held her 1965 letter copy, a second note. Also dated March 2024, written weeks before her death. It read, "That night happened. October 15th, 1965. He came to my apartment. I opened the door and he was crying. I had never seen him cry. I pulled him inside and we stopped pretending. For 8 hours we were what we could never be. Not the actress and the actor. Not Bibi and Alain Delon. Just Brigitte and Alain. Just two damaged people who wanted each other more than they wanted to be safe. At dawn, we made a pact. Never speak of it. Never try again. Never tell anyone. Let the world think he ignored my letter. Let them think he never responded. Let them think the silence was discipline. But it wasn't. The silence was protection. Protecting that one night. Protecting the memory. Protecting each other from trying again and failing. We agreed to forget. We never did. If you are reading this, we are both dead. And I want the world to know, he didn't ignore me. He came. For one night he chose me, and then we both chose silence. Not because we didn't care, because we cared too much. Tell them we were weak. Tell them the silence was a lie. Tell them we had one perfect night and spent 60 years protecting it. Tell them the truth. The news broke at 11 p.m. Paris time. Breaking, secret night revealed. Bardot and Delon did meet in 1965. The scandal was immediate, massive, viral beyond anything Dubois had imagined. The tragic love story became a secret affair. The noble silence became a cover-up. The 4 Thursdays at Le Palais became the prelude to October 15th, one night. Hidden for 60 years, protected by both until death. Twitter exploded. Trended worldwide. News channels interrupted programming, biographers scrambled, the romantic tragedy became a scandal. But underneath the frenzy, underneath the shock, underneath the "I knew it," and the moral outrage and the fascination, there was something else, recognition, because everyone understood. Everyone knew. If you have ever loved someone impossible, if you have ever had one perfect night you couldn't repeat, if you have ever protected a memory by pretending it never happened, you understood why they kept the secret. 2 people, 2 egos, one night. 60 years of silence, not because they didn't care. Because one night was perfect, and they knew trying for more would destroy it. So they chose to protect the memory instead of ruining it with reality. They chose silence. But the silence was full of that one night. October 15th, 1965, the night they stopped running. For 8 hours. And then ran again, together. In opposite directions. Some secrets aren't kept because nothing happened. They are kept because something did. Something so perfect you would rather protect the memory than risk destroying it by trying again. Brigitte Bardot and Alain Delon had one night. and spent 60 years making sure no one, not the press, not their families, not history, could touch it. Until today. Until both were gone, until the secret could finally breathe. They weren't saints. They were human. And that makes the story even more beautiful.